When I grew up as a little kid in the 1940s in a Irish Catholic community in Boston, I was, as all little kids are in any society, just inundated with nationalism. In this case, it was American nationalism. It may have been particularly intense, although I don't think so, because the United States was at war at that time in the Second World War. And I was also brought up in an Irish Catholic community with an intense hard wiring neurologically in Catholicism. And I absolutely never saw, for the first, 7 years of life, and never thought there could be. It never entered my mind that there could be an incompatibility between everything I knew in terms of Catholicism and everything I knew in terms of American nationalism. They were one and the same. And then one day in the second grade, one of the other kids said, "You know, George Washington wasn't a Catholic." I said, "Huh? George Washington's not a Catholic." So I checked it out with the sister, and she said, "Unfortunately, yes, he wasn't a Catholic." So I was absolutely stunned. How could God make the father of the country out of a Protestant? It made no sense. I mean, the way we regarded Protestants back in an Irish Catholic community in Boston in the 1940s, they were the Protestants. And here's God took one of the Protestants and made him the father of the country? Very, very disconcerting to find this break between Catholicism and Americanism. Now, you and I, we're all creatures of history. We are all creatures of history. Our history gives us the basic content of our consciousness, the history that's given to us, the basic content of our consciousness that we have to work through in some way, either in rejecting or accepting, to interpret the rest of our reality. Since Constantine, the history that most Christians, most of the time, Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, have been imbued with, is the history of justified violence and war and capital punishment. That was not the history that Christians in the first 3 centuries had as their primary historical consciousness. It was the martyrs, it was nonviolence, it was love of enemies, it was Jesus. Now, post-Constantine, it's justification of war and violence and so forth, century after century after century in different forms. Bishops, popes, priests, ministers, reformers, you name it, theologians, saints, all justifying violence and war in the name of Jesus now, after Constantine. Constantine, supposedly on October 28, 29th of 312 AD, he had some kind of vision, a labarum in the sky, which 30 years, 25 years later, his house historian Eusebius interpreted as a cross, and he said he interpreted as a cross, and that night he painted crosses on the horses and on the weapons. And if that's so, then that's the first time in the history of Christianity, on October 29th of 312 AD, that the very first time that Christian symbols and signs were used as the incense to lead people into war. Never before. But it continues to this day. And all the military chaplains, Christian military chaplaincies all over the world, just the starters. From that point, Constantine becomes emperor of the Western Roman Empire. He then immediately, because he won that battle, he thought because of Jesus, he immediately makes Christianity a legal religion in the empire. And on things go from there. St. Augustine, about 100 years later, Christians are so involved with the government and the military and so forth that he's got to figure out how to do something with this in terms of the gospel. And he writes in various spots, piecemeals together, a just war theory. How it can be that Christians can engage in the violence and the homicide and the slaughter of war and be Christian. Ambrose, his teacher before him, actually did it, and Augustine developed it. And it's Augustine's form that we use to this day for the most part. A few hundred years after Augustine, at the Council of Arles, there's a canon that says that priests cannot use spears in war. They can only use clubs because of their sacerdotal position. They're holy. And after that, there comes that terrible, terrible, destructive reality of the Crusades. When Christians go out to kill other people on behalf of the church and with a grant of a plenary indulgence if they kill a Muslim fighting for the Holy Land. Homicidal plenary indulgences are the first plenary indulgences in the church. And of course, once the powers that be get a hold of the idea that plenary indulgences work to get people to fight, they use plenary indulgences to get the people to slaughter heretics, not just Muslims. So the entire Christian community at Arles just eradicated under plenary indulgence. And after that comes the Inquisition, the killing of Jews, the burning and hanging and slaughter of Jews and heretics under the auspices of the Holy Office of the Inquisition, who then turned the people over to the state if they were thought to be heretics. And all that was done using plenary indulgences also, because people were given plenary indulgences to come to what is called the auto de fe, the burning at the stake or whatever they did of the heretic or the Jew. They came, they got a plenary indulgence. And on and on and on it goes. And the theologians are writing ever more sophisticated nuances and loopholes. And, at one time, they wrote, I think it was in the 12th century, they wrote, crossbows can never be used in just wars because they're so deadly. They're the bows that you fire with a trigger. And it's ceaseless, the almost fantasies that are being created logically from Jesus' teaching that can justify Christians killing in war. And it goes on, and it goes on, and it goes on. And millions of people every century are slaughtered by Christians. And Christians are slaughtered. And a lot of those people who are slaughtered by Christians are Christians, because more Christians are killed by the Roman Empire after Constantine than before, after the empire becomes Christian. And this goes on and on and on until we are where we are today. I suppose you know that in my mind, the symbolic nada, the symbolic low point of all this is August 9th of 1945, when an entirely Christian bomb crew flies over Nagasaki, an entirely Christian city, in fact, the original and the largest Christian city in Japan, the most revered Christian city in Japan, and this entirely Christian bomb crew drops the second atomic bomb on them, and in 9 seconds simply eliminates a community that had suffered for 240 years under Japanese persecution and in actually a catacomb kind of situation, and Christians destroyed them. Led by a Catholic man, Charlie Sweeney, Major. And most of that community at Nagasaki was Catholic. Christians destroying Christians. Christians destroying Christians as they did with Edith Stein. Those were Christians who destroyed St. Edith Stein. Arrested her, put her on the train, brought her to Auschwitz, gassed her there. Christians killing on August 9th of 1942. Christians killing Christians on August 9th of 1943. Franz Jagerstatter being killed, beheaded by German Christians because he wouldn't join Hitler's army. Constantinian Christianity has been a total and complete failure, morally and spiritually. I think it's very important to understand that all the St. Peter's basilicas and all the piazzas have no worth whatsoever if the price of them has been infidelity, disobedience to the teaching of Jesus. And so the question is, when will we see that justifying war under the auspices of Jesus is as evil and as wrong as justifying the Inquisition, the Crusades, and slavery? All of them at one time were absolutely well-funded, well-participated in Christian activities under the auspices of Jesus and the church. They are now all intrinsically grave evil, mortal sins.